Push on, Horde warriors, we are not far. Grom Hellscream's voice cut through the din, heartening those who heard it. Rexxar spun, the battle axe in his left hand, shearing through an Alliance warrior's neck, and the matching axe in his right slicing down to split another warrior from shoulder to waist. Beside him, his wolf Haratha snarled and lunged in, his massive jaws snapping shut upon a third warrior's arm. Rexxar heard the distinctive crunch of teeth splintering bone, and the man cried out, the sword falling from his hand. Haratha released the mangled arm, and in a lightning-fast move, sprang and crunched the man's throat in his jaws. They made a lethal team. Off to one side, Rexxar could see Grom Hellscream, chieftain of the war song, Gorehowl shrieking and slicing through foes. Other war song warriors fought beside their leader, their chants and battle cries blending together into an eerie melancholy of death and destruction. Rexxar was one of the few left who wasn't from that clan, but that was not unusual for him. He didn't really have a clan, at least not one involved in the Horde. His own people, the Mach Nathal, had always been stubbornly independent. Small in number, their lives had been difficult and focused on maintaining their traditional land in the Blade's Edge Mountains, defending it against ogres who sought to claim it. Rexxar had tried to tell his father, aLilFoxz, about the dark portal the orcs were building, about the chance to find a fresh new world for the beleaguered Mach Nathal. But Leorox saw only that his son was not staying where he had been born, to fight to protect his homeland. Both had the goal of helping their people, but in the end, Rexxar had followed the Horde and had been disowned for his choice. Now it was the only family he had. But then, he'd always been different. Another human went down. Rexxar glanced up, his height allowing him to see over the other warriors. Grom was right. They were not far from the dark portal. Perhaps 100 humans stood between him and his homeworld. Rexxar grinned and raised both axes. He was about to thin that number considerably. Over the last few months, the fortunes of war had swung back and forth. The Alliance had penned them in a small valley, adjoining this one for a short time, but could not hold the Horde there for long. The human warriors had underestimated the will and ferocity of the cornered orcs, and Grom had led his people to freedom. Ferocity. They had regrouped in a place to the north called Stonard. It had been the first outpost the Horde had created when they had come through the dark portal originally. The swamp, though fetid and unpleasant, held life and water, and Grom had refused to let the orcs fall into despair. They had built up Stonard, augmented it with raids on appliance supplies, and had eventually regained control of the portal. Back and forth, the Horde and Alliance had gone. But now, the little game was at an end. Grom had decided that it was time to return. No other clans had come to aid them, and while they were still a fighting force to be reckoned with, as the Alliance was discovering now, their numbers were slowly dwindling, while the Alliance seemed to breed more by the minute. 2. There was the matter of that strange device, the one the warlocks had tried to activate. They had told Grom that it would create a shield to protect them from attack, and make it easier to defend the dark portal. But the thing had been designed to destroy, not protect. Someone was ready to abandon them here, and Grom Hellscream would not let his people die because of another's treachery. Rexxar wanted to be around when Grom returned, and confronted the one who had issued the order. A human charged him on horseback, sword raised high, and shield set before him, but the soldier hadn't counted on Rexxar's height. Rexxar struck the shield a heavy blow with one axe, smashing it into the man, while knocking the sword away with the other. As the rider was jolted from his saddle, Rexxar brought both axes up and let the man's own momentum impale him on the blades. He grinned and let loose a fierce war cry as he yanked the axes free and stepped over the dead soldier, the riderless horse turning and fleeing, Haratha's snapping jaws. Sometimes it was good to be half ogre. Something flickered at the corner of his vision from inside the dark portal. He'd only seen it for a second, but he'd gotten a clear impression of lightning, rolling dust clouds, lashing waves, and shifting ground. Always before the portal had shown the other side, so he'd been able to catch glimpses of Draenor during the fight. But what he'd just seen, that was not his homeworld. It was a place of nightmare. Another Alliance soldier attacked him then, and that brought Rexxar's mind instantly back to the battle. He dispatched the warrior easily, but a handspan or two away from him, another orc was not so lucky. Clad in the robes of a warlock, the orc had green skin of most horde members, unlike Rexxar himself, who had not joined the horde until shortly before they invaded Azeroth. There were several warlocks here, some of them quite powerful, but their death magics took time, and things happened quickly in battle. Two warriors attacked the warlock together, and while the orc had managed to disable one, sending him fleeing in mindless terror, the other had stabbed the warlock through the chest before a nearby warsong warrior had caved in the human skull with a shrieking war club. Now the warlock staggered, one hand pressed to the blossoming bloodstain across his front, his skin already turning pale, sweat breaking out on his brow. Rexxar merely grunted and shook his head. He had little use for warlocks, and this one had clearly not been prepared for combat. The motion caught the warlock's gaze, and the wounded orc stared at Rexxar, disgust and disdain washing across his features in turn. Then he staggered forward, his other hand palm out. "You," the warlock shouted, "half-breed. You are not true horde, not true orc, but you will do. Come here." Rexxar stared at the warlock, too surprised to respond. What? This warlock insulted him and then expected him to help? Was he completely mad? But then, as the warlock drew closer, Rexxar saw the green glow outlining the orc's fingers and sucked in a quick breath as he felt a rare burst of fear. No, the warlock didn't want his help. He wanted Rexxar's life. Warlocks could leech life energy off others, healing themselves by draining another. The process had a high cost, and a severe wound could easily render a healthy orc lifeless. And this warlock's wound was mortal. Rexxar tried to step back, but he was boxed in, the orcs and humans behind him too tightly packed for him to move. He growled instead and raised both axes, determined to cut down the warlock rather than die himself. But the orc gestured, and suddenly Rexxar dropped to his knees, unbelievable agony racing through him. "What, no longer so sure of yourself?" the warlock taunted softly, stepping up close enough that his breath tickled Rexxar's skin. Rexxar crumpled and writhed in pain, too crippled by it to struggle. "Does it hurt? Do not worry. Soon the pain will be gone." He raised his hand, slowly, deliberately, drawing the moment out, and Rexxar stared as the green-limbed flesh inched closer. Already he thought he could feel his energy being drawn from him, and a wave of fatigue washed over him. A fierce snarl cut through the haze of torment, and a large black blur slammed into the warlock. Haratha, no! With the warlock's distraction, the spell broke and Rexxar could move again. But he was too late. His devoted wolf companion had shoved the warlock away, but in the process, the orc's hand had touched Haratha's thick pelt. Rexxar stared, horrified, as his friend shriveled before his eyes, the powerful wolf shrinking in upon himself in an instant, and then collapsing, his body turning to dust that the wind carried away. "Ah, that feels better," the warlock remarked, rising up to his feet and brushing off his robes. The bloodstain remained, but now he moved without injury. "Your pet just saved your life," he told Rexxar with a nasty grin. "Yes, he did," Rexxar replied softly, twirling both axes up and around. "But who will save yours?" With a snap of his wrists and a roll of his shoulders, the axes came arcing back down to drive deep into the warlock's chest on either side of his head. Rexxar had put much of his considerable strength into the blows, and the warlock crashed to his knees as the impact drove him down, the axes ripping through him and leaving him to collapse in pieces upon the blood-soaked ground. Rexxar stared at the body, panting, then turned to look at the spot where the wolf had died, the rage still roaring through him and thundering in his ears. He knelt and placed his hand, wet with the warlock's blood, on the dust for the moment. "You are avenged, my friend," he said softly, "though I would you were still by my side." He took a breath, rose, and channeled his grief and rage into action, calling out for the war song leader. Grom looked up, saw Rexxar, and waved his axe to acknowledge the half-orc. One thing Rexxar had always liked about the war song leader, for all his savagery and violence, Grom had always given him the same respect he would show any warrior. He had always shown Grom the proper respect in turn, but right now, results were more important than manners. "The portal," Rexxar yelled, pointing. "Something is wrong." Grom glanced toward the portal, just as a handful of orcs staggered through. At first, Rexxar's heart lifted, thinking the horde had sent them help after all. But then he saw that these orcs were already battered and bleeding, that they were running rather than marching, running as if fleeing something on the Draenor side. "Run," one of them shouted as he barreled into an Alliance soldier, hard enough to knock the man over, and kept right on going without even stopping to attack the prone target. "Run!" "What's going on?" Grom demanded, and Rexxar shrugged, just as confused. They were both still staring toward the dark portal as the scene it framed changed from the crazed landscape of a moment before to an utter maelstrom of swirling color, and then to complete darkness. And then it vanished. A heartbeat later, the stone framework that had enclosed the dark portal, the rift between worlds itself, began to creak and groan. The sounds increased, straining, rising, and then the center snapped, the two massive halves toppling inward and colliding with a loud crack and a cloud of dust and rock chips. The support pillars fell next, knocked off balance by the initial impact, and Rexxar ducked his head, pulling the edge of his hood over his mouth to avoid choking on the dust that billowed forth. Orcs and humans alike were scattered, trying to escape the confusion and debris. "No," someone was screaming, and other groans and cries filled the air. For his part, Rexxar was struck dumb, staring at the rubble that had once been a gateway between worlds. The portal gone? Didn't that mean they could never go home? What would happen to them now? Fortunately, one orc kept his head. "We will regroup," Grom shouted, slapping Rexxar on the shoulder. "You gather everyone on that side. I'll get them from this side. Move toward the mouth of the valley." Rexxar was jarred from his paralysis and nodded, hurrying to obey. He let the hood fall again once he was clear of the swirling dust. He could still feel the panic within, but forced it back by concentrating on the task Grom had assigned him. Every orc he saw, he directed back toward the valley's front, and whether because of his size, or the axes he wielded, or simply because they were desperate for orders, the orcs all obeyed without dispute. By the time Rexxar reached the mouth himself, Grom was back as well, and all the Horde members still in Azeroth were with them. Most of them looked as stunned as Rexxar felt. "Grom, the portal is gone," one of them wailed. "What do we do?" "Yes, the portal is gone, and the Alliance regroups," Grom announced loudly, gesturing to where the humans were gathering in front of what had been the portal just moments before. "They think we'll be easy prey. They think we'll be lost and frightened without the portal, but they will be wrong. We are the Horde." His glowing red eyes scanned the crowd before him, and he lifted Gorhowl. "We head north, back to Stonard. We discovered what happened to our world. We tend to our wounded. We survive. Then we'll regroup so we can face the humans on our terms rather than theirs," he growled. The Alliance closes in. Will they take us?" A resounding no lifted up from what Rexxar privately feared was the last remnants of the Orcish Horde. Grom grinned, tilted his head back, opened his black tattooed jaw, and uttered his battle cry before he charged, his people following. That one, Grom marched up to the orcs sitting huddled beside the fire as they camped. Oh, new scene, apparently. That one. Grom marched up to the orcs sitting huddled beside the fire as they camped in Stonard that night. He was not dusty or bloody, and Grom knew all his warriors. Grom clamped his hand down on the orc's shoulder and yanked him backward, looming over the orc, whose eyes were wide with surprise. Beside Grom towered Rexxar. As easily as if he were hoisting a child, Grom lifted the orc and held him in the air. The orc's feet kicked and flailed. The war song chieftain leaned in close. "Now," Grom said softly, a deep scowl on his face. "What in the name of the ancestors happened back there?" Shivering, the orc frantically told all he knew. The other orcs listened. The only sound was the orc's rapid talking, the crackle of the fire, and the omnipresent sounds of the swamp at night. When he finished, no one spoke. They simply stared, shocked beyond speech. Finally, after several minutes, Grom shook himself. "So," he growled, glaring at the others and half shaming, half intimidating them to look away, shuffling their feet and straightening up. "We prepare then." "Prepare?" Rexxar cried, and Grom turned to face the half-orc, half-ogre warrior. "Prepare for what, Hellscream? Our whole world is dead, our people are dead, and we're trapped here forever. Alone. What in the name of the ancestors should we prepare for?" Rexxar's grip on his axes was so tight, Grom thought he heard the stone halves creaking from strain. "We prepare for vengeance for the dead," Grom snapped, an image of Garrosh leaping into his mind's eye once more. His son and heir. "My boy," he thought. "My boy, dead like all the rest." "We are all that's left," he insisted, rounding upon the other orcs. "We are the Horde now. If we give up, it means the end of our everything we knew, everything we cared about. Our race will not die unless we lie down and accept death, like craven weaklings. If Ner'zhul plans..." "Ner'zhul," Rexxar shouted, leaning down so his face was right by Grom's. This must be his fault. Who else could have caused a world to shatter so? "He betrayed us all. He said we would save Draenor, and instead he destroyed it." "We don't know that," Grom insisted. "We knew he was dealing with extremely powerful magic to open portals to other worlds. Perhaps something went wrong. Or maybe it went perfectly right for him, Rexar countered furiously. Maybe he was just using us, all of us, our entire world, to further his own ambitions. That's what Gul'dan did, isn't it? Many of the assembled orcs grunted or murmured or snarled agreement. Everyone knew of Gul'dan's betrayal and how it had cost them the Second War. And who trained Gul'dan, Rexar continued, who taught him? Ner'zhul. Clearly the fruit did not fall far from the vine. The mutterings were louder and angrier now, and Grom knew he had to stop them before the group of warriors devolved into an angry mob. Do you not see that it doesn't matter, he stated, cutting through Rexar's anger by projecting calm. Shall we decide what to do based upon rumor and worry? Shall we pine for what could have been, or fret about what might have happened? Is this how the mighty horde behaves? He looked from orc to orc, including them all in this conversation, and was pleased to hear the murmurs die down as they waited to hear what else he had to say. We have survived. We are on Azeroth, a world full of life and food and land and battle. We can restore the horde and sweep across this world once more. Some of the other orcs cheered his statement, and Grom used that energy to fuel his own fervor, whipping Gorohal around over his head so its shrieking would add a backdrop to his words. Yes, the Alliance is hunting us, he shouted, and yes, we are no match for them today. But one day, and that day soon, we will be. Here we can rest, recover, and strategize. Here we will launch attacks as we have already been doing for the last several turns of their moons. We will grow strong again. We'll become the predators once more, and the humans will quake with fear. He jerked his axe to stop and held it still above his head, lowering his voice so his words fell softly into the quiet. And one day we, the Horde, will rise and take our vengeance against the humans with a true and final victory. The warriors cheered and whooped and shouted, raising their own weapons high, and Grom nodded, pleased. They were all behind him again, all united once more, all except one. You have been betrayed repeatedly, each time by another orc claiming leadership, and still you continue down that same path, Rexar said softly, though his eyes burned with rage. You have no reason left to fight. Before, we fought to protect our people, by claiming this world for them. But they are gone. We no longer need this world. With a handful left, you could find a place the humans have never gone, and claim it without shedding a single drop of blood. Where would the glory be in that? One of the other orcs shouted. Grom nodded. What is life without battle? He demanded of Rexar. You are a warrior. You understand that. Fighting keeps us strong, keeps us sharp. Perhaps, the half-breed admitted, but why fight when there's no need? Why fight just for its own sake? That is not fighting to save anyone or to win anything, or even for glory. It is fighting from sheer bloodlust, from love of violence alone, and I am sick of that. I want no part of it. Step forth and say that, he challenged, his voice an ominous rumble. Step away from the rest, where I can see you clearly, and call me a coward to my face, then see whether I shirk from a fight. No one moved, and after a second Rexar shook his head, a sneer on his heavy features. You are cowards, he proclaimed, spitting the words down upon them. You are too afraid to live truly, outside the shadows of lies and promises you have been bought with. You have no courage and no honor. That is why you cannot be trusted. The half-orc's shoulders slumped. From now on, only the beasts I will trust. Grom felt a mixture of emotions as he watched the towering warrior depart. How dare Rexar abandon them now, when they most needed to stay together? At the same time, who could blame him? He was not even part of the Horde, in the normal sense, for the Mach Nethal were ever reluctant to leave the Blade's Edge Mountains. To the best of Grom's knowledge, only Rexxar himself had responded to the Horde's plea to fight during the First War, and then again during the Second. And what had it gained him? He had lost his world, his people, and even his companion, the wolf. Was it any wonder the half-orc felt betrayed? No one walks away from the Horde, someone insisted. We should drag him back by his ears, or kill him. He insulted us all, another pointed out. He should die for his insolence. We need his strength, a third countered. We cannot afford to lose him. Enough, Grom shouted, glaring at them all. The dissenters fell silent. Let him go, he ordered. Rexxar has served the Horde well. Let him have his peace now. And what about us? One of the warriors demanded. What do we do now? We know what to do, Grom replied. This world is our home now. Let us live in it fully. But even as they nodded and returned to the fire, to speak softly in voices about plans and victory and supplies, Rexxar's words returned to haunt him, and a part of Grom wondered if they would ever find that which they had lost so long ago: peace.